Aloha. Well, I've made it to my birth nation of the United States once again, and as per usual, when I arrive here, I'm treated as a terror suspect by order of Israel, of course, who has declared me to be a, quote, operative of the Hamas terrorist organization, which I take as a great compliment coming from the Jewish supremacist state of Israel. Of course, they are in charge of America. The enemy is well inside the gate, and the stooges who run America also give orders to these minions on the ground who are given the order to harass me and treat me as a terror suspect. Now, one thing that I need to say, I think it's really quite relevant, is that over the years it's become increasingly clear to me, and literally has been said to me on this last journey into America, that those who are interrogating me, which includes Customs and Border agents and FBI and others, is that they, off the record, respect what I'm doing and acknowledge, indeed, the Jewish control of American politics and ultimately its use of the American military for Israeli wars. This has been acknowledged, again, off the record, and in fact there's a great deal of respect for me that I am saying this publicly, because of course they can't possibly say these things. There's also a genuine, seemingly respect for me in that I don't hate America, and I don't hate America. I want what's best for America. But we did, those of us who served in the military, put our hand up under oath and swore to uphold the U.S. Constitution. How can we believe we're honoring that when the country's clearly been hijacked and we're not serving American interests? This is what upsets me more than anything else. Now, ultimately, driving through the heartland of America to the Freedom Palooza Festival, which was an amazing event with a lot of good people, no censorship whatsoever, so there was no taboo subject. Very refreshing to be around people like this. The politically correct bullshit that we find in most of these conferences is really quite annoying, to be honest with you. So, absent of that, we had a great gathering of people, and ultimately we know, deep down, all of us, what we need to do. So the question is, when are we going to do it? And one of the things that really has happened to me on this trip to America, although I don't plan on staying here, is a sort of revived love for this country. Going through the heartland of America, there's so many good people in America, and I'm still hoping and I'm still believing that we are going to do the right thing. And of course, in my opinion, one of the greatest things that could possibly be done is a military coup. In fact, the real patriots within the U.S. military should be arresting these traitors in the U.S. Congress and reinstituting constitutional law and making null and void every law which is contrary to the U.S. Constitution, starting with the Patriot Acts 1 and 2 and NDAA successively. This is a necessary step. Now, I'm bringing back this video which I produced a couple years ago about Iran because it's very clear that the plans for Syria have not quite worked out as they had wanted. Of course, Syria is damaged badly and fractured from these Israeli wars that fit perfectly in line with Oded Yanan's strategy for Israel in the 1980s to effectively balkanize the surrounding Arab states and get them to bleed each other. They have achieved a lot of that, but they have not succeeded in using Syria as a stepping stone towards the real target and ultimately towards the World War III agenda. And the stepping stone of Syria was towards Iran. What we see, though, is with Syria not working according to plan, is that the crosshairs are being firmly fixed back onto Iran, and so many lies are being perpetuated again. Now, this is not about loving or hating Iran. This is about the truth. And Iran, quite frankly, if you actually studied it, you'd find has a lot to be proud of. Unlike the United States, which is nothing but a pack of lies, one lie built on another, Iran has so many truths that it doesn't have to embellish and can be very proud of, such as a very peaceful history, such as providing sanctuary to Christians and Jews over the centuries, such as standing up to the monster, to the empire, and doing so without flinching, refusing to bow. These are qualities that every self-respecting man or woman would appreciate. So Iran has much to be proud of, but Iran is very much in the crosshairs because although militarily it poses no real threat to us, it does pose a massive ideological threat. Again, it refuses to bow. And of course, what do we do when we go and fight Israeli wars? We bow to the Jewish supremacist, Talmudic, satanic, pedophile, bankster cult that is the Israeli power structure which runs America. So, we as Americans are going to be used for another war for Israel if we allow it. American sons and daughters are going to be sacrificed yet again. 22 American service members already committing suicide because of the Israeli wars they have fought. So I bring back this video, which wasn't really seen too much on the internet, because the issue of Iran is every bit as much pertinent today as it was 2 years ago. In fact, everything I said in this video 2 years ago is even more applicable today, given that Iran becomes that primary target once again. And I'll start it off with just a couple of clips showing Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is continuing the legacy of embarrassingly, slovenly, sycophantic, servile behavior towards Israel. going and kissing ass to the Jews at the Western Wall with his yarmulke on his head, going to Saudi Arabia and prostrating himself to the head choppers galore who provide the finance for ISIS and Al-Qaeda before it, the head choppers who continuously insult American intelligence by allowing us to allow our commander-in-chief to sell $350 billion worth of weapons, which will be in the hands of the head choppers, which will be used to kill American service members. Make no mistake about that. As far as I'm concerned, what Donald Trump has just done is absolute treason, knowingly providing weapons to the head choppers who provide the means financially, ideologically for ISIS, Israeli secret intelligence services. So let's look at this video once again. Please share it far and wide. And let us not allow ourselves to be used as stooges for Jewish supremacists any longer.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know."
While American audiences may laugh at the seeming folly of how decisions to go to war are made, the end result has been incalculable suffering and death for millions upon millions in the decimation of Iraq. I wonder how much laughing there will be when the American people fully comprehend that the invasion and occupation of Iraq was from beginning to end an unlawful war of aggression based on fraud for the expansionist agenda of the Greater Israel Project. In other words, Americans have been used as cannon fodder by a treasonous, bought and paid for U.S. Congress and White House. Even worse, this story of sacrificing American sons and daughters on the altar of worship of the Jewish state of Israel marches on.
It's an objective assessment that no one will have the courage to speak about. They're controlling much of our foreign policy. They're influencing much of our domestic policy. Wolfowitz, as Undersecretary of Defense, manipulated President Bush #2 back into Iraq. They pushed definitely to try and get Bush before he left to move into Iran. We're conducting an expansionist policy of Israel, and everybody's afraid to say it.
So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years. Starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So it has to pull in the Americans to do the work, to do the job, because they can't do it themselves. They have to demonize Iran so that America will do the bombing and the American soldiers and Marines will go and die and not the Israelis, because they know they can't do anything about Iran. Israel, if you look at it strategically, is a small state, very small population. Yes, it has nuclear weapons. It has, the threat of using nuclear weapons, but it cannot last in a war with Iran, and they know it. And this is why they demonize Iran, and they want the Americans and the Europeans to do, to take care of Iran for them.
But I believe that Israel has a powerful stranglehold on the American government. They control both members of the House and the Senate. They have us involved in wars of which we have little or no interest. Our children are coming back in body bags. Our nation is bankrupt over these wars, and if you open your mouth, you get targeted.
I know Donald Trump. I know him very well. And I think his attitude, his support for Israel is clear. He feels very warmly about the Jewish state, about the Jewish people, and about Jewish people. There's no question about it.
Iran funds arms and trains terrorists, militias, and other extremist groups that spread destruction and chaos across the region.
For decades, Western leaders have claimed that the Islamic Republic of Iran poses an existential threat to the safety and security of the world by its alleged pursuit of nuclear weapons. Many claim further that Iran is religiously fanatical, anti-Jewish, and that ultimately it seeks to wipe the Jewish state of Israel off the map. To the contrary, Iranian leaders point to their peaceful history and have repeatedly declared that they have never and will never seek nuclear weapons because it is immoral and against God's will. Somebody is lying. In this edition of In Focus, we will expose not only who is lying, but the insane agenda behind the lies.
I've come here to Tehran in Iran, a place that we've heard so much about over the years. Now let us imagine that Iran is launching wars of aggression against its neighbors and killing civilians on a regular basis. Let us imagine further that Iran is provably committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide according to the Black's Law Dictionary definition of the word. Imagine even further that Iran has illegally acquired hundreds of nuclear weapons and that leaders within Iran have threatened to use those weapons against Europe and beyond if its existence were threatened. Now, if that were the case, we'd all be wise to consider Iran a legitimate threat to global security. The only problem is what I have just described as the criminal activity of the Jewish state of Israel, not the Islamic Republic of Iran. So why is it that Israel is treated as a peace-loving democratic nation in the Middle East while the people of Iran are being collectively punished and continuously threatened with all-out war?
They were taken over by the U.S. in a coup d'etat in 1953. The puppet dictator, the Shah, was installed on the throne by the CIA. His torture chambers were built by the CIA. And finally, the Iranian people overthrew the Shah and achieved independence in 1979. So when you hear all the propaganda about Iran being a threat, that's really how it's a threat. It's a threat because it's a free and independent country. And if we allow a free and independent country to exist, here, especially here in the Middle East, the other nations might also want to be free and independent.
Iran is the ultimate stumbling block for what Israel wants to do in the Middle East, what I prefer to call Southwest Asia, which is a crucial part of Eurasia. Full spectrum dominance over this whole region, which implies balkanization of individual states. They have achieved that in Iraq, they are achieving that in Syria, they achieved that in Lebanon, Jordan doesn't count, and Iran is the ultimate stumbling block. So Iran must be demonized because it's against Israeli plans of regional domination.
Iran is a threat for the order of the world because Iran contests this order, and Iran is supporting a lot of countries and groups who are contesting this order. So I understand what Benjamin Netanyahu wants to say. He wants to say that Iran is a revolutionary country. That's true, yes.
We must have a peace in which territories adjacent to Israel are not used as launching grounds for rockets and missiles against the Jewish state. Secondly, we must make sure that the backer of these terrorists, Iran, doesn't have nuclear weapons and nuclear-tipped missiles. Today, we're the targets. But with the ICBMs that they're developing, London would be in range, Washington would be in range. In fact, the whole world could be in range.
Gareth Porter is a historian and author of the book Manufactured Crisis. Serious geopolitical analysts consider it to be an authoritative book on the subject of Iran's alleged nuclear weapons program.
So would it be accurate to say that the same people who provided us with the dodgy dossier and the other really fraudulent evidence to support the invasion and occupation of Iraq, is it the same people who provided that who are providing this so-called evidence for the Iranian nuclear crisis?
It's the same group of neoconservatives within the Bush administration, closely allied with Israel, of course, who were responsible for both. but different people were in charge of the details of the plan. In the case of Iraq, of course, it was Paul Wolfowitz and Douglas Feith at the Pentagon.
This country was taken over by a group of people with a policy coup. Wolfowitz and Cheney and Rumsfeld, and you could name a half dozen other collaborators from the Project for a New American Century. They wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control.
In the case of Iran, however, it was John Bolton at the State Department who had the primary responsibility for Iran policy. We know that he went on unauthorized trips to Israel. The first unauthorized trip in June of 2003, he met with the head of Mossad, and there was no record of what was said in the meeting because it was unauthorized. And that a few weeks later, Mossad created a new office, which we know from a journalistic account that was published later, had the function of putting information out to governments and news media about the Iranian nuclear program.
I went downstairs, I was leaving the Pentagon, and an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office and said, I want you to know, he said, sir, we're going to attack Iraq. And I said, why? He said, we don't know.
The same people who forged the dodgy dossier claiming that there were WMD in Iraq, which was the excuse for that horrific war that killed over 1 million people, are doing the same thing with Iran. They actually plotted to implicate Iran in a nuclear program at exactly the same time, using the same people and the same techniques as the dodgy dossier on the Iraqi WMD. So it's another WMD scare, and it's just as bogus as the first one.
It was absolutely fraud. They weren't cherry picking. This was out and out fraudulent documentation.
Israel is now saying that they believe that Iran will have nuclear capability, nuclear weapons capability by 2009. They believe that Iran will have nuclear capability, nuclear weapons capability by 2009.
This story is very strange because it's continuing since years and years. There is no evidence at all of a military program. This country was inspected much more by any other country in the world, but they continue to say that this country will have a nuclear bomb next week, always next week, since years, next week.
Every month that goes by brings Iran closer to possessing a nuclear weapon.
But you've got to say that time is marching on, and so is their nuclear weapons program.
The world is united in support of our determination to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon.
Brought a diagram for you. Here's a diagram. Where should a red line be drawn? A red line should be drawn right here.
من تأکید می‌کنم که جمهوری اسلامی هرگز در پی تسلیحات هسته‌ای نیست. شعار ما انرژی هسته‌ای برای همه و سلاح هسته‌ای برای هیچ کس است. ما بر این هر دو سخن پای خواهیم فشرد.
Iran is one of the least aggressive countries in modern history. It's been continually attacked, invaded, and terrorized, and they've never attacked anybody for a very long time. So they're a classically defensive power.
Tell me if you are an ally, if you join our coalitions, if you're part of the international financial system, etc., you can get away with anything. But if you have a theological political system of government, if you had an Islamic revolution against our own interests in the Middle East and beyond, then you are an outcast, an outsider, a pariah, and you must be isolated, contained, and if everything fails, bombed.
My personal position on that is this: we ought to try every possible avenue we can to see if we can get them to correct their desire and goal of acquiring a nuclear weapon, but we cannot let them acquire that weapon. We are the only country in the world that can stop that. The Israelis, in my opinion, do not have the capability of stopping it. They can delay it. There will also be many, many side effects, all of them adverse, from an Israeli strike. But at the end of the day, if we don't get it done the way the administration's working on it now, which I totally agree with, then we ought to take them out.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, we're
Hey,
working hard. We're working hard.
This is America, bombing the world into democracy and freedom. And here we have Secretary of State Hillary Clinton cackling like a clinical psychopath with the prospect of instigating a war of aggression that would in all likelihood lead to World War III. Let us not forget that this woman is the odds-on favorite to become the next president of the United States. What we see within this matrix of power is a sickeningly servile mainstream media constantly allowing the lie that Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons to go unchallenged and thus maintaining the illusion of Iran as a threat. Even worse, Charlie Rose actually begins laughing with Hillary Clinton and James Baker about the U.S. government's penchant for World War III.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, we're working hard. We're working hard.
In the following clip, we see a refreshingly rare example of an Israeli leader being called to task about the lie that Iran is planning to, quote, wipe Israel out.
This idea that Iran wants to wipe Israel out. Now, that's a common trope that is put about by a lot of people in Israel, a lot of people in the United States. But as we know, Ahmadinejad didn't say that he plans to exterminate Israel, nor did he say that Iran policy is to exterminate Israel.
Well, I happen to disagree with all due respect. You speak of Ahmadinejad.
Disagree with what?
I speak of Khamenei, Ahmadinejad, Rafsanjani, Shamkhani. I give the names of all these people. They all come basically ideologically, religiously. It's a statement that Israel is an unnatural creature. It will not survive. They didn't say we'll wipe it out, you're right, but it will not survive. It is a cancerous tumor, just to be removed. It was said just 2 weeks ago again.
Well, I'm glad you've acknowledged that they didn't say they will wipe it out.
Serious journalism, such as the previous interview, is vastly overshadowed by the far more typical example in the next interview, in which David Cameron is allowed to brush aside the grave threat Israel's hundreds of nuclear weapons pose to all people, and in typical mainstream media servility, the so-called journalist allows Cameron to bamboozle the viewer by diverting back to the fraudulent claim that Iran intends to wipe Israel out.
Why should Iran have to declare that and Israel not? There's still so much ambiguity about Israel's nuclear weapons in the first place.
As I said, everyone should apply the Non-Proliferation Treaty. I think that is absolutely key. But I think there's a special case here with Iran, a country that is trying to get a nuclear weapon and that is saying that it believes in wiping another country off the map.
This is the story that's continued on until it's continuing right now. I mean, it's the same regiment of propaganda against Iran.
Senator Frank Church from Idaho, he held the church hearings in the U.S. Senate because he had found out that there were CIA agents in all of the mainstream outlets throughout the United States. At the time, they had identified 300 agents, and it's probably even more than that. So the mainstream media in the United States is tightly controlled. It's a tightly controlled propaganda machine.
I happened to work with CBS News before the revolution occurred. I witnessed how the image of Iran changed in foreign news reports. I witnessed how Iran became a demonic target through the past 35 years. So yes, there's quite a difference between what the reality is in Iran and how it's portrayed for the Western eye.
I've been truly blessed to travel all around this beautiful planet of ours, and I've been to places that most people would never even think to go. And this is largely because the mainstream media portrays people in places like Iran and Palestine as evil, as hating the West, as wishing that we would all perish and die. This is absolutely untrue, and the fact is, in places like Palestine and Iran, you're going to find the most generous and hospitable people that you will ever meet. They say in America, you want to kill all of us. They're lying to us.
So here I am standing in front of the Christian church. Directly across the street, we've got the Zoroastrian temple. Down the street that way, we've got the Jewish synagogue. And of course, we've got mosques here as well. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all practiced together in a city of Tehran, 15 to 18 million people, and virtually no sectarian hatred and no sectarian violence. This is not the Iran that we're told about in the West. Very kind. Thank you. We share. I don't eat meat, so we share. Thank you. Very kind.
I love your interviews in PressTV.
Oh, thank you.
That's how you're...
Thank you, my brother. Thank you so much. You know, the West is obviously presenting Iran as a real threat to...
Yes. You know.
So the television didn't have any effect on you. You know this is not...
Not at all.
We don't even have a TV at home.
Yes, exactly.
Neither do we.
Yeah, but you know, we have some friends who were before in Iran, and also all of them said it's a beautiful country, and the people are very, very friendly.
Ireland.
Ireland. Okay,
Ireland.
thank you very much.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Mamnoon.
Thank you.
It's just, you know, this is the kind of thing that you see in Iran. It's just lovely people, genuine, real, and, you know, it's just so completely contrary to what we're told. It is really criminal the way that Iran and its people are misrepresented. Indeed, a clash of civilizations is being cultivated by a morally bankrupt Western matrix of power that is willfully, intentionally, committing fraud against the people by justifying insane policies that support Israel at all costs. Understanding the fraud, it's time to introduce 5 amazing Iranians who shatter some of Western civilization's greatest lies. Nader Talibzadeh is a fiercely independent film director and producer who studied film at Columbia University in the United States. He has an audience of millions on his Iranian television program and is immensely respected in Iran and beyond. Siamak Mossadegh is Iranian, a doctor, a member of the Iranian parliament, and he also happens to be Jewish. Wait until you hear what he has to say. Bijan Nobavi is also a member of parliament, and he also happens to be a journalist who went to the front lines as a 16-year-old boy during the Iran-Iraq War, a purely defensive war in which 1 million Iranians lost their lives. Bijan is among 100,000 plus Iranians who were victims of Saddam Hussein's chemical weapons attacks that were directed and assisted by the CIA. To this day, he suffers respiratory problems from his exposure to chemical weapons. Dr. Sam Tarabi is one of the infamous Iranian mullahs. While mullah has largely become a derogatory term, all the term actually denotes is that one is an Islamic expert. Sam is an extremely thoughtful man who I connected with quite easily, as he also happens to have lived and, believe it or not, surfed in my home state of California. And lastly, we will meet Mansoura Karami, a gentle widow and mother whose husband was murdered for working on Iran's fictitious nuclear weapons program. Evidence all but proves his murder was carried out by agents of Israeli Mossad.
Why would the West be so, the imperial powers be so against Iran? Because of one thing. As soon as Imam Khomeini took power, from the very beginning few months, what happened is we had the Day of Quds, the last Friday of the month of Ramadan, the first Ramadan after the revolution, which was, everybody's attention was focused upon Jerusalem. And that this is an occupied land, something has to be done about it. It's beyond, the PLO now. So it's the old focus of the entire Muslim world. And this thing has to be resolved. So the Day of Quds, the Day of Palestine, the Day of Jerusalem, started at the last Friday of the Ramadan of the first year the Islamic Revolution began, and a simple countdown began. And this ticking of the clock and this attention focused on Israel became paramount. And very quickly, the Zionist regime took the lead in a very strategic way to demonize Iran, and they've been doing it ever since. So that's the starting point. Iran has a history of being hospitable to Christians and Jews. Nebuchadnezzar tried to destroy the Jewish people, they took refuge with the Persian king. So the Jewish people know very well who we are.
It may be interesting for you. For example, 4 years ago, Israeli government says that I would pay $20,000 to each Iranian Jewish people who immigrated to Israel, but no one respond to this because we think that our identity is a historical identity. We are Iranian and we are Jew, and we are as much as Iranian as much as we are Jew. Few Iranian Jews go to Israel, they usually want to come back to Iran, or you want to go to USA or UK, because the culture of the Israel, which is based on a part of a sort of racism, cannot be tolerated by Iranian Jew. I think that Zionism and anti-Semitism are sibling brothers. Because both of them says that Jewish people are different from other people. We do not need the manipulation of the Zionists because they only can disturb our condition. They will not improve our condition.
یا ما رو صلحجو تلقی نکنه. من فکر میکنم صلحجوترین ملت‌های دنیا ایرانی ها هستن و بسیار از نقاط کشور ما در شمال و جنوب به تصرف دشمن در اومده. بخشی از قفقاز، آسیای میانه اینها مربوط به ایران بوده و اینها رو در قراردادهای ظالمانه از کشور ما گرفتن. قرارداد ترکمنچای هستش که بخشی از خاک ایران رو روس‌ها بردن، مثل آذربایجان، مثل سایر کشورهای منطقه مرزی ما. و اینها همه نشون دهنده این است که ما همواره مورد حمله بودیم و هیچ وقت ما به هیچ کشوری حمله نکردیم. در اسناد سازمان ملل متحد یونایتد نیشن هم همینا هست و ایرانی ها به عنوان صلحجوترین کشورها مطرح بودن و ایرانی ها دارای یک تفکر و یک فرهنگی هستن که بیشتر به اصطلاح نفوذشون رو در دنیا از طریق فرهنگی، یعنی نفوذ صلح طلبانه. تاریخ تمدن ایران نشون میده که ملت ایران ملت صلحجویی بوده. چه دلیل داره که ایرانی ها که انقدر صلح طلب بودن و همیشه همواره صلح رو به همه جای دنیا بردن، چه دلیلی داره بخوان ملتی باشن که امروز به غیر از این فکر کنن؟
Civilization is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing. You know, civilization in the good sense of the word.
Or at least it can be.
Right. Where it ends up increasing the ethical and the spiritual and the goodness in people. Where it allows them, gives them a space to grow spiritually and ethically, as opposed to just being a materialistic. I think this is the significant difference between Western civilization and what Iran is trying to do. Is we're trying to have that material welfare and that technological advancement, but maintain that spirituality and that ethical aspect of it as well, which is lost in the West, unfortunately. During the Iran-Iraq War, the Iraqis used chemical weapons on us. Everybody knows this. It's not, you know, propaganda. It's a fact. It's an established fact by Western medical authorities that Saddam, with the help of the Americans and certain European countries, used chemical weapons in the war, and we never retaliated, even though we had the ability to do that. But we didn't do it because of moral reasons. The reason why, the main reason why we don't have nuclear weapons is because it is immoral. That is actually the main reason why we don't have nuclear weapons. We have come to this conclusion, and this is reflected in the religious edict and in the religious guidance that we have from our scholars, and at the head of that, the supreme leadership, a clear edict forbidding the use of nuclear weapons because it is a moral issue.
وقتی که آمریکا میاد یه تحریمی رو دیکته میکنه و بقیه اروپایی‌ها انجامش میدن، بالاخره دستای همشون یک جا هست و به همدیگه کمک میکنن که سلطه داشته باشن. حالا من نمیدونم این سلطه به چه درد میخوره؟ مگه ما همه انسان نیستیم؟ چه فرقی میکنی با هم؟ توی دین ما سیاه و سفید نداریم، مسیحی و مسلمون نداریم، همه با هم برابر و یکسان هستن.
It's made to seem normal that people face drone attacks, depleted uranium attacks, that this is put into a formula, a psychological warfare formula that keeps keeps being amped up, this ISIL concoction. It's like some kind of Hollywood horror story.
Understanding the magnitude of the fraud perpetuated by Western lackeys, it is a matter of integrity, if not survival, that we consign the myth of Iran as a threat to the rubbish bin of history. In the next episode, reality and intelligence will be our guide in identifying the very real threats to humanity and just how serious those threats are.
So here I am in Times Square. I thought I'd make the most of the opportunity while I was in New York State. Here we are at the site of the 9/11 false flag. The 9/11 false flag that is rightfully blamed on Israeli Mossad and traitors in the U.S. government and intelligence services and military. The 9/11 false flag in which Israelis were arrested on the day with explosives in their vans. The Israelis who were dancing, celebrating, filming the event because they had foreknowledge and admitted to it on Israeli television. The idea that Iran is the threat when we absolutely know for a fact these things that are in the public domain mocks the American people. This country is still controlled by the enemy inside the gate. Absolutely no question about it. And until we deal with the enemy inside the gate, the Jewish supremacist, Talmudic, psychopathic, pedophile bankster cult that runs this country and mocks the American people by having people like Netanyahu come and speak to the Congress 3 times and get 29 standing ovations in one go. It mocks the American people who send their American sons and daughters off to fight Israeli wars so that Israel can expand. Iran is not the threat. It is Israel who has 200 to 400 nuclear weapons, who now has the ability to deliver those nuclear weapons at any point in the world due to the Dolphin-class submarines supplied to them by Germany. It is not Iran who's been fighting wars all over the place. It is Israel and America that are the big threats here. And it will be American sons and daughters once again who are going to be used as cannon fodder to the tune of 22 American service members a day committing suicide because they're being sent off to fight illegal, immoral, unjust wars for Israel to expand. And make no mistake about it, the biggest threat that we face is not Iran and its mythical nuclear weapons program. It is Israel and its 200 to 400 nuclear weapons and the Samson option. And if you're not aware of what the Samson option is, Israel says that if its existence is threatened, that it will, quote, destroy the world with its nukes. There are many high-level Talmudic Jewish supremacist thinkers in Israel who are ready to launch nukes and destroy Europe and the rest of the world if indeed they feel their existence is threatened. And make no mistake about it, Israel is living on borrowed time. So is Israel going to exercise the Samson option and blow up the world because the world refuses to accept this psychopathic criminal state and all of the danger it poses to the world? It's not North Korea, it's not Syria, it's not Iran, it's Israel and the traitors inside the United States that are the real threat. How about we start taking care of our own house and our own business, get our noses out of other people's business, stop this madness World War III agenda, clean the damn house, reinstate the U.S. Constitution, and arrest the damn traitors in the U.S. Congress.
Brian Gumbel says, what are you talking about? You only get $3 billion. And I said, Brian, that's only the foreign aid bill. Look at all the other trade compacts, economic assistance, military assistance. I'm saying this to you right now. Israel gets approximately $15 billion a year from the American taxpayers. That $15 billion is $30,000 for every man, woman, and child. And people in my district are losing their pension benefits.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor of presenting to you His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
What I am is an American. You see, I think America comes first. And we have a one-sided foreign policy in the Mideast. America is in danger if America doesn't take back their government without foreign influence.
And I do see a lot of old friends here. And I see a lot of new friends of Israel here as well. Democrats and Republicans alike.
funds arms and trains terrorists, militias, and other extremist groups that spread destruction and chaos across the region.
I know Donald Trump. I know him very well. And I think his attitude, his support for Israel is clear. He feels very warmly about the Jewish state, about the Jewish people, and about Jewish people. There's no question about that.
In the previous program, we exposed the fraudulent claims that Iran poses an existential threat to the safety and security of the people of the world, and we noted that Iran's real crime is its refusal to prostrate itself in service of the empire. We identified those maintaining this fraudulent Iranian threat, specifically a matrix of power that employs Western heads of state and national governments, as well as the mainstream media and the so-called quote-unquote experts. In this program, we move beyond the myth and lay out the treasonous nature of the Western matrix of power. We shall identify the prostitutes within this system as the most grave and immediate threat to all life by virtue of the fact that the fraudulent script they are reading from logically concludes with full-scale World War III. Indeed, we shall conclude that it is the enemy within, not fabricated external threats, which must be overcome if humanity is to achieve a just peace on planet Earth. We have reached a point in human history where our own survival hinges on our capacity to understand the nature of how our world is ruled. The challenge, however, lies in facing the earth-shattering conclusions that all too powerfully collide with our delusions born out of indoctrination. Nonetheless, here are two truths we must face. Number one, the United States government, and by default, U.S. military, have been hijacked by nefarious foreign agents who are using said military to carry out wars of aggression in pursuit of a goal known as full-spectrum dominance. Millions dead and maimed, as well as more than 22 American servicemen and women committing suicide on a daily basis, is just partial testimony to this fact. 2. The American people would never have supported such wars if they were told the truth. Thus, the media and so-called experts have incessantly lied, with false flag operations routinely employed to dupe the American public and the West in general into the self-destructive madness of wars that never end, until, that is, the mushroom clouds rise. So the next question we shall ask, as it will lead us directly to the heart of the gravest threats facing humanity, is how did Israel acquire its hundreds of nuclear weapons?
This is a US technology, but as the US law forbidden to transfer this technology, during the years 50, the US government, breaking the US law, gave this technology to the French government with the idea that the French government will transfer the technology to Israel.
The Israeli leadership wanted nuclear weapons desperately as far back as the 1950s. They viewed this as indispensable to their survival and expansion. And the great global financial powers behind Israel were, of course, quite friendly to this because they're using Israel as I said, their organized crime base.
The Israeli agent Shimon Peres has his own office inside the office of the French Prime Minister. Yes, that's strange, isn't it? And they organized the transfer of technology to Israel. And after that, the problem of the Israelis was to experiment this technology. Of course, they don't have the land for that in Israel, so they make an agreement with the apartheid regime in South Africa, which is exactly the same regime that in Israel.
In the 1960s, there was a tremendous battle between President John F. Kennedy and the Israeli government headed by Ben-Gurion over this program. Ben-Gurion was determined to achieve nuclear weapons. Kennedy was equally determined to stop him.
I am absolutely convinced that John F. Kennedy is the last president of the United States to have honor, integrity, and courage. Not only was JFK fighting to halt the Israeli nuclear weapons program, he was insisting that Israel's nuclear power plant be inspected, something that has not been done to this day. He was also demanding that the American Zionist Council, since renamed AIPAC, be registered as a foreign agent. We see today the magnitude of his failure to achieve this goal by virtue of the fact that AIPAC virtually owns America's long-since prostituted politicians. And even more dangerous than JFK's immensely dangerous positions on these matters was his immaculate Executive Order 11110. This order effectively removed the unconstitutional powers of the Federal Reserve to issue debt-based Federal Reserve notes and gave that power back to the people by issuing non-debt silver-backed U.S. notes. When Americans finally learn their true history, they will understand the sublime beauty of John F. Kennedy's actions in his final months of life. Not only were his actions a thing of beauty, his words will likewise be seen among the greatest acts of patriotism in the history of the United States.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day.
The result was that Kennedy died, and he was replaced by Lyndon Johnson, a Zionist puppet who was completely controlled by the Zionist lobby on all Middle East issues. And Johnson turned around and essentially handed the Israelis their nuclear weapons.
It is hard to overestimate just how profound America changed when the patriot John F. Kennedy was replaced by one of the supreme American traitors in Lyndon Baines Johnson. Not only did Johnson bolster Israel's nuclear weapons program, he did not compel the American Zionist Council to register as a foreign agent. The end result of this is an American political system that is so corrupt that it would make a banana republic blush. As if this isn't bad enough, in June 1967, Johnson covered up the brutal Israeli attack on the USS Liberty, an attack that resulted in the murder of 34 American sailors as well as 171 casualties. While the attack was taking place, Johnson personally recalled air defenses for the Liberty with the following explanation, quote, "We are not going to embarrass an ally," end of quote. The Liberty incident was a classic false flag to be blamed on Egypt. Israel's intention was to suck American sons and daughters into an extremely dangerous war for Israel, this time against Egypt, a Soviet ally. This false flag nearly resulted in World War III by virtue of the fact that nuclear-armed Phantom jets were launched towards Cairo and were only recalled when it became clear that the Liberty was not going to sink and witnesses would live to tell the tale.
It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
Since then, the program which is somewhat shrouded in secrecy, it's a deniable program, but they don't deny it very seriously, has grown. Many estimates have about 400 Israeli nuclear weapons. And there are reports, unconfirmed by mainstream sources, of course, that the Israelis actually have miniature nuclear weapons planted in cities in the West, and particularly in the United States. So this is the world's most dangerous nuclear program. Nuclear weapons are in the hands of terrorist madmen, and those are the terrorist madmen of the government of Tel Aviv.
Israel is the pirate country of the Anglo-Saxon Empire, so it's above the international law, and he must have all the things that are forbidden by the international law, including nuclear nuclear bomb when we forbid it for Iran and for a lot of other countries.
They're a very small country. They have no business running around with nuclear weapons any more than other countries that size do. But for some reason, they've been given a free pass. What is that reason? Some would say that they're a poor, persecuted minority that needs these weapons to defend themselves. That's the official line. But the reality is that this allegedly poor, persecuted minority runs the world. They are the people who control the biggest banks and corporations around the world, and they've turned Israel into an organized crime base for the board of the people that run the world. And therefore, they've got the right for nuclear weapons, and they can control all these international institutions and jam their nuclear weapons down the throat of the entire global community. It's an outrage.
Well, every candidate for Congress at that time had a pledge. They were given a pledge to sign. And I was new on the scene. And so the pledge had Jerusalem as the capital city, the military superiority of Israel.
American Congress people have to sign this pledge.
Yes, you sign the pledge. If you don't sign the pledge, you don't get money. So, for example, it was almost like water torture for me. My parents observed this. I would get a call, and the person on the other end of the phone would say, I want to do a fundraiser for you. And then we would get into the planning. I would get really excited because, of course, you have to have money in order to run a campaign. And then 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the planning, they would say, did you sign the pledge? And then I would say, no, I didn't sign the pledge. And then my fundraiser would go kaput.
And Brian Gumbel says, what are you talking about? You only get $3 billion. And I said, Brian, that's only the foreign aid bill. Look at all the other trade compacts, economic assistance, military assistance. I'm saying this to you right now. Israel gets approximately $15 billion a year from the American taxpayers. That $15 billion is $30,000 for every man, woman, and child. And people in my district are losing their pension benefits.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor of presenting to you His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
What I am is an American. You see, I think America comes first. And we have a one-sided foreign policy in the Mideast. America is in danger if America doesn't take back the government without foreign influence.
And I do see a lot of old friends here. And I see a lot of new friends of Israel here as well. Democrats and Republicans alike.
What does Stone Mountain, Georgia, have to do with Israel? What I was doing was servicing the needs of my constituents. And I was not allowed to do that because I did not toe the line on U.S. policy for Israel.
I'm deeply moved by this warm welcome. And I'm deeply honored that you've given me the opportunity to address Congress a second time. Mr. Vice President, do you remember the time that we were the new kids in town?
So this is basically something that is mandatory, that every congressperson has to sign, saying that, what, Jerusalem, you said, is the capital of Israel, and what else?
You make a commitment that you will vote to support the military superiority of Israel, that the economic assistance that Israel wants, that you would vote to provide that.
This isn't a question for the Congress people serving that they are representing, or they're supposed to be representing, the people of the United States, not a foreign country, and yet they have to pledge allegiance to a foreign state.
That's what
no one questions this.
That's what I was asked to do.
They control much of the media, they control much of the commerce of the country, and they control powerfully both bodies of the Congress. They own the Congress.
Now, when a 9-term congressman levels charges against an American ally that include corrupting government policy at the highest levels, with consequences such as American sons and daughters being sent off to fight and die in wars for Israel, as well as crippling the American people with debt to the point of American taxpayers paying $30,000 per person per year to fund Israeli expansion, what do you reckon the first question would be from a so-called free Western press journalist?
Are you an anti-Semite?
No, I'm not. That's exactly what they're going to say.
This is the mainstream Western media. Countless provable lies pour from the mouths of politicians and pundits alike without so much of a whisper of a challenge. But as soon as a patriot like James Traficant speaks profound truth with cataclysmic consequences, the tried and true anti-Semite charge is trotted out. Even when the media do some good, such as the following PBS interview of General Wesley Clark, political correctness and the tightly controlled left and right paradigm structure prevents serious investigation outside of the acceptable parameters. So when General Clark tells his story of how he learned of the planned U.S. invasion of Iraq, there is no follow-up to this incredible revelation, such as the obvious scenario that Israeli agents are pulling the strings of the invasion of Iraq because Iraq was target number 1 on their greater Israel agenda. But of course, to suggest that would immediately result in a barrage of anti-Semite charges.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know."
While American audiences may laugh at the seeming folly of how decisions to go to war are made, the end result has been incalculable suffering and death for millions upon millions in the decimation of Iraq. I wonder how much laughing there will be when the American people fully comprehend that the invasion and occupation of Iraq was from beginning to end an unlawful war of aggression based on fraud for the expansionist agenda of the Greater Israel Project. In other words, Americans have been used as cannon fodder by a treasonous, bought and paid for U.S. Congress and White House. Even worse, this story of sacrificing American sons and daughters on the altar of worship of the Jewish state of Israel marches on.
It's an objective assessment that no one will have the courage to speak about. They're controlling much of our foreign policy. They're influencing much of our domestic policy. Wolfowitz, as Undersecretary of Defense, manipulated President Bush #2 back into Iraq. They pushed definitely to try and get Bush before he left to move into Iran. We're conducting an expansionist policy of Israel, and everybody's afraid to say it.
So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So it has to pull in the Americans to do the work, to do the job, because they can't do it themselves. They have to demonize Iran so that America will do the bombing and the American soldiers and Marines will go and die and not the Israelis, because they know they can't do anything about Iran. Israel, if you look at it strategically, is a small state, very small population. Yes, it has nuclear weapons. It has, the threat of using nuclear weapons, but it cannot last in a war with Iran, and they know it. And this is why they demonize Iran. And they want the Americans and the Europeans to do, to take care of Iran for them.
But I believe that Israel has a powerful stranglehold on the American government. They control both members of the House and the Senate. They have us involved in wars of which we have little or no interest. Our children are coming back in body bags. Our nation is bankrupt over these wars. And if you open your mouth, you get targeted.
James Traficant paid the price for representing the interests of the American people over the demands of the powers that be. In true Orwellian style, Traficant was convicted of corruption in 2002. Subsequently, he endured 7 years in prison for essentially refusing to bow to the masters of American politics. Indeed, America has been hijacked, and the result is for the servile and corrupt to be rewarded, while those with honor and integrity are ruthlessly targeted. James Traficant was dead before he could see justice for himself, and unsurprisingly, the circumstances of his death are predictably suspicious, undeniably suspicious. Many, including myself, refuse to ignore the significant motivation agents of Israel had in seeing his demise. Regardless of who is responsible for his death, Traficant's uncompromising stance regarding America's subservience to the Jewish state will in the end cement him as one of the great patriots in modern American history, who, like many of the founding fathers of America, warned us of the enemies inside the gate.
I became a top target of the Israeli lobby, and no question, I'm labeled anti-Semite, which I'm really not, but they do control much of our government, our press, Broadway, Hollywood, the money system, and they basically control this country. And you do not want Israel as an enemy, and I became an enemy of Israel. That, I think, was my downfall.
This global war on terror has cost America over $20 trillion, if not more. The official is 16, 17, but who knows? I mean, ever since they started this, global war on terror and the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan is when America became so indebted.
We spend more money on defense in the when we call it defense, it's really offense. We spend more money on the military in the United States than almost all the other countries in the world combined.
Beyond dictators, true tyrants have taken over the global system. And of course it's rooted in the money, its roots are at this fabricated false money system that puts tremendous power and influence in a tiny minority of people who can fabricate the imagery of what's going on in the public mind, so that what is really going on is made to seem obscure and is put behind veils.
So while the mainstream media and all other associated minions continue to choreograph necessary illusions so that we, the people, will remain continuously ignorant, divided, and ultimately manipulated, this same network of deception withholds from us a very realistic scenario involving all-out nuclear war. Some observers, including myself, recognize the probability of this scenario is so great that it represents the gravest threat facing humanity today.
Well, the bottom line of the Israeli nuclear program is the so-called Samson option. This is a form of extreme nuclear blackmail. If the world doesn't go along with Israel, especially in a situation where Israel felt that its existence as an apartheid Jewish state and crime base for the world's biggest banksters is ever threatened, then it will blow up the capitals of Europe as well as the Middle East, and implicitly they're also threatening the United States. Though they may not have missiles that can reach the United States, as I said, there are reports in the intelligence community that, in fact, Israel has planted miniature nuclear weapons in American cities.
I remember in the 1970s being in a conference, a big hall in Toronto at the medical school, and there was a very famous Jewish professor who was an expert in Hegel. I don't remember his name, but he announced to the group, to the whole audience, he said, if Israel is ever going to go down, if we're going to go down, we're not going to let what happened to us during World War II ever happen again. If we're going to go down, we're going to take the rest of the world with us. And this, of course, becomes the Samson option. This is destabilizing the global system. This makes the survival of humanity into the future very problematic.
we consider Israel a dying entity, the Zionist regime, I mean, for what they've done to the people of Palestine. Now, the new developments, this hoax entity is fading. Everyone says that. Even Kissinger says that. Even the Zionist policymakers would say that.
This Samson option is the biggest nuclear threat on Earth because the state of Israel is facing an impossible situation with the demographic crisis, the crisis of legitimacy. They're not accepted as legitimate by any of their neighbors, and the worldwide anti-Zionist movement is growing and spreading to getting into the established institutions. And Palestine's going to be in the International Criminal Court going up against Israel. They're beleaguered on a number of fronts. And the minute that they feel that they might actually have to end apartheid and become one country for all of their citizens of all religions and ethnicities on an equal basis, at that moment, they're threatening to blow up the world. So it's a tremendous threat. It looks like it's virtually inevitable that at some point they will either have to make good on that threat or to withdraw it. And who knows what they'll do.